Hey everyone, welcome to the Unhandled Exception podcast. I'm Dan Clark and this is episode number 53. And today I'm joined by Matthias, Jost and Tim Cadenbach. And we're going to be chatting about a new community initiative they've created called weare.net. And it's actually been a while since we've had a group episode, so it's nice to have two guests on today. And these are always fun ones. So could you both introduce yourselves to the listeners and tell us a bit about what you do? Maybe not weare.net, because we can talk about that obviously as part of the episode. I guess, Tim, you're on the top of my matrix of webcams, so if you want to go first.
Yeah, I can, totally. Yeah, my name is Tim Cadenbach. I work for DeepL in Germany. I'm, the only developer evangelist for DeepL right now, working mostly with the API community, third parties, building something using the DeepL API. I'm also a Microsoft MVP since in my second year now. Developer since 25 years, roughly. Most of the time in the Microsoft environment in some form. So
very nice. That's a very long time. How about you, Matthias?
Yeah, my name is Matthias Jost, and I work for a company called Inktes. It's in Switzerland, and we do work with web applications, SQL and ASP.NET based. We deliver solutions for tax offices, building insurances, and companies in other markets. And I've also been working in other areas at the beginning of my career, like embedded development. So I worked with C, for example. But these days I'm focused on .NET.
Very cool. So before we dig into weare.net and what it is, I'm just going to do this episode's listener mention. And this one goes to Boxley. I don't know their real name, but this is on Mastodon. And he tweeted or tooted, I don't know what the term is on Mastodon actually, and he said, Dan and Ian, I just came across your podcast for the very first time with this episode. I really enjoyed it and it helped affirm a few concepts that we will definitely take back to my work. Thanks. Now he's referring to episode 51, which was 2 episodes ago, where I was joined by Ian Cooper to talk about his Brighter library. And if you want to get mentioned on the show, just send a tweet or tweet, I think it is, using hashtag unhandledexception. All feedback is greatly appreciated. And I am Dracan on Twitter, which is DRACAN. And normally around this kind of time, I normally mention our Slack channel. However, we're having a bit of a change here and moving over to Discord instead. So if you head over to the website unhandledexceptionpodcast.com, you'll see a link to our Discord server. It'll be really great to see this grow, so hopefully see you on there. And lastly, a quick reminder that this podcast is sponsored by Everstack, which is my own company providing software development and consultation services. For more information, visit everstack.com. So weare.net. What is weare.net? I do know, but for the listeners' benefit.
You're part of it already.
So maybe I can start with the beginning. So in April 2022, I would say it was the beginning because it was a little GitHub repo just with content creators listed. And by that time, it was just the idea of listing all the content creators, having them sorted by country, so to make them all discoverable. And so that GitHub repo grew quite a bit, and it reached about 1,000 stars. And then it got some interest, and then one day Tim approached me, and we started to talk. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I was sick for quite a while about things like, let's say you want to start writing a blog post or start a video channel or whatever. Like getting started is tough. Like it's literally impossible to get an audience straight away because like all the mechanisms behind like YouTube, Twitter followings and all the things are really, really tough. And we even noticed inside LinkedIn groups, it's even hard to get like people to see your stuff. Even inside a closed group, it's hard to get stuff listed. And also, I was following a couple of .NET content creators already, but then here and there you stumble upon like someone else and was like, oh, why didn't I see that guy earlier? That really helped me now. So I wanted to have a common platform for .NET content that doesn't make a difference whether someone is like a creator with like 25 years experience and 100k followers or someone who just started. That should make a difference because the content can be good as well. And then I remembered the list Matthias has created earlier. And I was like, hey, that's actually the perfect combination because we have a list of creators already and I can turn that into a nice web platform. And here we are, I think 1 month later or something, we have like 140 creators listed. We have more than 1,000 people who signed up already on the platform. It's quite an amazing journey. So here we are.
Yeah, it's definitely very impressive. I remember when Matthias first started tweeting out about his GitHub, and basically, as you say, when it was just a list of creators, and that became, I saw lots of tweets and things about that, so that became quite popular quite quickly, and now obviously it's grown into weare.net, which is quite cool. Out of interest, what made you think of the name weare.net?
I came up with the name, but actually I can't remember. Oh, actually I do. I'm currently for DeepL, I'm working on our appearance on the We Are Developers Conference in Berlin. So I'm used to that term, we are whatever. And I just thought for whatever reason, weare.net is quite cool because that includes everyone in many, many ways. And the whole community is what makes .NET what it is. Like all the companies, obviously, but also all the content creators, all the people with open source in the .NET field. And to say, have something like a common platform and then say, hey, we are .NET and we are all under this common platform actually completely made sense. And it's a cool brand after all anyway, so.
Yeah, definitely.
Really like that.
I saw you've got someone creating a mobile app or a Maui app as well.
Yeah, that's Gerald. I actually don't know his family name. So I'm in touch with James Montemagno from the .NET community team. Like I met him a couple of times on conferences, and we just got to talk. And I told him about the weare.net project, and then he mentioned the old Planet Xamarin project he had, which is a little bit similar. They were aggregating feeds from Xamarin authors, pretty much. They were only aggregating the feeds. They didn't show the feeds or anything. They just had an RSS feed which combined all the authors. And then, I told him about weare.net, and he was like, wait, they actually had the idea for a planet.net. They just never did it. And now we sort of went ahead and did all that. And he was like, okay, now there's no point in building a planet.net if we have that already. So he said we can take over the Planet Xamarin, get all the old authors onto weare.net, which already happened. So if you go to the .NET MAUI section, it's actually one of the largest sections we have, I think, right now. And then Gerard, he's also a Microsoft employee, but he's part of the old Planet Xamarin team, and he reached out and he was like, hey, let's try to play around with an app. I was like, yeah, cool. And now he's made crazy progress. He was like, yeah, I'm playing around with it for like 30 minutes. Let's see how far I get. And now he can't stop working on it, and it's growing, and it already looks really nice.
That's awesome. I think I saw a tweet from him earlier today saying it's progressing well, but he wishes he was a designer or something, or he had designer skills. That's very cool. It is nice, the whole productivity thing with Maui, but to knock things up very, very quickly.
It's crazy, yeah. That's one thing I don't like myself about the platform right now, because it's designed by a developer, and you can see that sort of in many areas. Like I'm not a designer, not at all. I mean, it looks quite good. The brand is nice. Like Matthias came up with a logo and all that, and that looks really nice, looks really great. But having some more input from a real designer could maybe help a little bit.
That's cool that you got James Montemagno on board as well. A few years ago, because I run a .NET user group, .NET Oxford, and he at some point tweeted out that he was looking to do a talk at a user group somewhere in Europe. Any user groups interested? So I kind of jumped on the reply, and in fact, I think it was Clifford Agius, who's been on the podcast before, who actually mentioned his tweet to me. So I quickly jumped on and replied back to it, and because it's Oxford, he was like, "Oh, I've never been to Oxford before. That sounds quite nice." So he ended up coming and speaking at our user group. So that was really surreal, like having a coffee with him beforehand. And he's like, "Am I really in a coffee shop having a coffee, chatting with James Montemagno?" So my imposter syndrome really kicked in then.
He's an awesome guy. I met him we went to the .NET Developer Days in Warsaw last year. He was there as a speaker. Also, Scott Hunter was there, and a couple of other people. It was really, really awesome. And talking to all these guys is always fun.
Yeah, James is such a good speaker as well, because when he was speaking at .NET Oxford, his whole talk, like I edit this podcast quite heavily, but his whole speech was as if it had been edited, but in real life, because it was just like no ums and ahs, completely clear. Just like, you can tell he's a very practiced speaker. I'm very jealous.
Yeah, I can't do that either. Every time I do a talk, I'm look at the recording of the talk, and like every time I'm going crazy about myself. Like, what did you do there, and what did you do? Like constantly, like and it's weird. I don't like myself speaking, but people like it. I don't know.
Well, I get rid of all those for the podcast, so hopefully be happy listening
Yeah.
back. So you mentioned, well, I mentioned Mastodon before in the intro, and I know you've got a good community on Twitter. Have you got any presence on Mastodon, or do you plan to?
Actually, I tried Mastodon, but then I didn't continue there. So I sent out a few posts there, or twos, but didn't continue. Yeah.
I must admit, I'm on both, and I much prefer Twitter. I just know
Okay.
a lot of people in the .NET space that I was following and engaging with on Twitter have moved away and now are primarily on Mastodon, which is kind of a shame because, as I say, I prefer Twitter. But yeah, it's kind of like now there's two places where before it was just Twitter was just a great community, especially on the .NET space. It's a bit
Yeah.
of a shame, really.
Twitter is weird right now in many ways. When you're just using the platform, you don't even notice it. You don't notice any big difference. The media around Twitter is like crazy, especially what the guy is doing there lately. That's just crazy. But just using Twitter, you don't really notice any difference. Like I'm still quite used to it. The other idea we have is, so we definitely want to have some form of community channel, whatever it is. Might be Discord, might be Slack. We didn't really think about that yet. It's just that we said, hey, we need to have something. Like we have an internal Discord server for us, which is barely configured right now. That we might turn that into a community thing, but we didn't really think about anything further. We do LinkedIn, we do Twitter right now.
It's funny. I don't know whether you read my mind then, but my next thing I was going to ask was actually about Discord, because I mentioned earlier that we moved the podcast from Slack to Discord, and .NET Oxford, we've actually just moved from Slack to Discord and kind of embracing Discord a bit. And it does feel like that would be a perfect thing for We Are .NET.
Discord is crazily amazing. I really like Discord, especially they ramped up the whole integration aspect, so you can really get a ton of things into Discord quite easily. For example, we thought about having a separate channel for anyone who's signed up as a creator. I mean, that's like 4 lines of code or something. Do an API call to us, here you are. So that's really easy. Moderating Discord is really easy. They have a lot of, they have a thing called AutoMod, which already is quite good in moderating the channels. And on top of that, I mean, even Matthias doesn't fully know that yet, I guess. The .NET Foundation reached out to us because they really, really like what we do. Basically, they said something like, oh, we should have come up with that ourselves quite a while ago. And they really like what we do. And they have a Discord channel which is barely used. We don't have anyone yet. And nothing is set in stone. There's no agreements made or anything, but we are talking to them. Or I'm talking to them about possibilities. And one thing could be to have like a common shared Discord server.
That'd be cool. Yeah, well, the things I like about Discord is kind of, well, I think with Slack, it feels like you're creating an account for everything, every different thing, where Discord, you've got one account which you can go to each one. But I also like the fact that the DMs are outside each of the different servers. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, if you want to say DM me on Discord, it's not talking about a particular server, it's talking about, yeah.
I think that's one of the top suggested features for MS Teams since a couple of years, to be able to easily talk to people on a different tenant. It works sort of these days. I think they added that at some point, but by far it's similar to what Discord does.
Yeah, I can pitch with MS Teams because it's quite company oriented. It's like for businesses.
Yeah, it's not a community thing, really.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's cool. The .NET Foundation. I didn't realize they had a Discord channel, so I might join that.
There is one. Yeah, there's not much in there, but there is one.
Another thing I saw quite recently on Twitter is a nice image with a whole bunch of swag saying "We Are .NET," like T-shirts, stickers, and the hoodie or something.
That tweet was crazy. I didn't expect anything similar to happen. Like, really, no. Well, I was playing around with Spreadshirt, a company where you can design swag and well, they do all the fulfillment for you. So you only design the stuff and set a price, and they do everything, shipping worldwide, stuff like that. And I ordered a badge, like you can see, I wear that nice hat here. Well, people in the podcast can't see, but yeah, I have a nice hat. I just ordered a couple of things like to test it, and I was like, "Wow, that looks really cool." When I had it in my hand, I was like, let's put that in a tweet." And within minutes or so, there were tons of likes on that and tons of comments. And I think that tweet alone got us from 880 to more than 1,000 followers now.
Oh, wow.
I did not expect that, but I got like a couple of messages on Twitter. We got a ton of comments that people like the design, like the thread and whatever. So we really need to figure out how we can get that to people.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, I've got under here, I've got a .NET shirt, but it's not We Are .NET, so I'm going to have to get on that waiting list.
That's a developer thing. I mean, people like that, and there's a ton of people who like that they are part of the .NET community. I mean, that's what actually makes the thing so good. That I've seen that in other developer communities as well, like the Java community is quite strong, or the Angular community, for example. They are really, really strong. But the .NET community is great. Like, especially if you are an MVP, if you're in the MVP group, sometimes you can see that people really love .NET. They love to tell everyone they are using .NET. They love to wear swag that somehow says, hey, I work with .NET. And that's really great.
Very cool. So if one of the listeners is a creator, but they are not on weare.net, what process would they go through to get on it? I know I've seen things like with PR requests with JSON for these card things. Can you explain how that works?
Do you want to take that? Yes.
Yeah. So it's actually 2 steps. So it means you can just sign up with GitHub on weare.net. Go to the site, click sign up, fill out the form. So then we have your account basically with your GitHub handle. Then you can make a PR request with a JSON car. So you see tons of examples, all the other creators, also an example JSON where you can fill in the details. And then we run the creator verification process from time to time. And then you're all set. So you would have your feeds, which can be in 2 categories. One is personal. So there we allow like content that can be a bit off topic. And then we have the .NET category, which means that it should be about .NET directly or indirectly. And that's how we keep the feeds clean and on the landing page and in the content area. But I think as a creator, you just can go to the homepage, sign up, and then it should be easy to get from there. And you, of course, if you have any problems, you can always reach out to Tim or me on Twitter or LinkedIn.
The whole idea we had with that GitHub-based approach is that we wanted to have some form of, I mean, gatekeeping is probably the wrong word, but we wanted to have some verification process to make sure that the feeds people send us are actually good enough in terms of not necessarily the quality, what they send in. We don't look at every video. We don't read every single blog post because that's literally impossible. Right now we have like, I think 3.2K something in the database. We can't look at all that. That's literally impossible. But we want to make sure that people send us feeds that actually contain content which relates to us. So if you talk about .NET, hosting on Azure, maybe Visual Studio extensions, or anything that sort of belong to the ecosystem, that's completely fine. We had some creators which are still on the platform, that's totally fine, but who are more talking about social things, being a great leader, stuff like that, which is important as well. It sort of relates to .NET as well, but we don't want to have that on the landing page. So they can have these kind of things on their personal profile page. That's why we separate the .NET feed and the personal feed. So whenever you want to have more than .NET content, you can give us 2 feeds, one filtered for .NET content and the other with whatever you're talking about.
That's really nice. I'm actually just looking at my profile on the weare.net just so I can kind of like give, because obviously it's an audio only podcast, to try and give the listeners an idea of what it looks like. So it's literally weare.net.io/ then my username Drakan, and it looks really, really good. I've got to give my hats off. It shows a feed of it's showing my YouTube stuff, so it's got all the thumbnail stuff of each video. It's got links to my social stuff like Twitter, GitHub, LinkedIn, no Mastodon, I don't know whether that might be my fault for not adding it. And what have we got? And there's a feed and a links, which takes. Oh, is this? So is the links one like? Oh, is this just repeating my links when I go to the links tab?
Yes.
I see.
Yeah, it's sort of, well, it's a little bit work in progress. The normal members, which are not creators, only had a page that showed their links. And I said, that's not nice. And so the normal people also have the nice about section on the left-hand side. And they also have links now. And yeah, we're working on the design, really. That's why we still say it's a beta. We are not completely happy with it. I mean, the whole thing didn't exist like a month ago. We're still working on it and still improving everything constantly. So things are changing a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy speed. As you say, if it didn't exist a month ago and all that's happening now, that's very impressive. And when you say it's not finished, I don't think software isn't finished, is it? It never is.
Yeah, that's true, definitely.
The idea we had for the Weir.net platform obviously started from the .NET Creator List. So everything Matthias did over a year roughly is what he was working on, and that sort of was the groundstone for the whole portal. But I always said that the creators are a huge part of .NET and a huge part of .NET education, for example. They help people get started with .NET. They help people learn and improve their .NET skills. Like even I had a video the other day of some creator I really, really liked that really helped. But we said, well, the whole .NET community is more than just videos and blog posts. Obviously, there's a ton of people who build great projects, who work on open source solutions that really, really help. And these deserve some form of platform as well. Many of these don't produce any blog posts. I was talking to Matthias a while ago, and we realized there's two kind of people. There's people creating content, and they might have a GitHub repository just to produce some samples for the blog posts or videos. And then there's people who run a full-blown open source project, some library, some full-blown application, whatever it is, and they just occasionally write a blog post or do a video about their work, which is a completely different thing, sort of. And we said, hey, we actually need to support both types, so we actually need to add open source projects on the platform as well.
That's a very, very good point, actually. And I must admit, I hadn't really thought about it that way. But yeah, look, so many people putting so much of their free time into these projects. And if it's an existing project, you probably, like, if someone does a blog post and tweets out about it, then it gets various retweets or whatever, because it's a new announcement, a new thing being created. Where if it's a project that's already existing and everyone's using it but getting lots of value and it's being maintained, a lot of work still goes into that. But it probably gets less of a platform ongoingly. I know that's one thing that Nick Chaps says in his videos. He quite often really tries to pick out these open source projects and really promote them, and things like it in the podcast as well. I know Simon Kropp's been on before and he's done his Verify library, and I know that's one when you were talking about open source maintainers. He jumped out of my mind because he does a ton of stuff on his library, and you can't even mention a technology, and then he'll add an extension to support that in his Verify library. And it's like he does quite a lot. And I was looking at, in fact, coincidentally enough, yesterday there's Serilog Sync for OpenTelemetry, where it's actually not really been touched that much, but it's something I would find quite useful for something I'm doing. And I looked at it, and Simon was on it doing commits in there, so it's like, whoa, he's everywhere. But yeah, these maintainers, as you say, that don't blog or don't create YouTube videos and stuff, they need to have a platform too, some way of marketing their stuff in a way.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I have a heart for open source in many ways. The one thing that always makes me mad, sort of, is to see how some of them are struggling. I'm not sure if you remember the thing that happened with the identity server, for example. They said after all they earn $50,000 or something per year from donations. They did that as a full-time job, and I think Identity Server 4 was used in probably 1 million applications. I don't know. That's one of the most used thing in the whole .NET ecosystem, I guess. And they literally didn't get any, well, not the proper funding or feedback they deserved. And they said, okay, we stopped doing that open source. We're actually making that a paid product now, which is completely understandable. And many companies in the open source field need a lot more attention. If I had way more money, then I would probably go out there on GitHub and donate quite a bit to quite a few of these. Well, I can't, but with Weir.net, we can at least give them a platform and try to get them more attention.
Yeah, definitely. That'll be very, very good to see. So, talk about open source and stuff. I'm assuming that all the stuff we're talking about with Weir.net, like the website, the mobile app and everything, is that open source on GitHub as well?
Not yet. I thought we want to have a pretty good structure. It's constantly changing right now. I move things around. It's based on .NET Core. I move controllers around. Just the other day I moved all things in a separate model class just to have it more structured. I think it's 5 services now, so it's rapidly growing. And at that point, it's hard to take in any contributors or anything, because having to explain all that to someone that just doesn't work. So I want to have that up to a point where we said, okay, this is actually not beta. That's a final product now. We're happy with what we have right now. And at that point, I actually want to make everything open source, and people can contribute as well. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. Is there any other areas that we've not covered?
Yeah, I do have one thing I would like to talk about. We have one thing we are unsure about, which is a little bit about how we deal with things like sponsored ads, companies asking, hey, can you put our job ad there or whatever. So we always said the whole platform is free, will always be free, it's open source, whatever. But obviously with a platform like that, there is quite a lot of builds, because it all runs on Azure. We use Azure Cognitive Search and quite a few other services which have to be paid. So we need to find some way, or not right now. Right now it's still fine, but depending on the growth, at some point we need to find some way to get all the thing funded. We always said we don't want to turn that into a job portal. That will never happen. So we'll never have like, oh, use like .NET jobs or whatever. There's tons of platforms for that. I don't want to do that. We might ask companies whether they want to sponsor us or something. The .NET Foundation probably might help here as well. I don't know. But I think it's important to say that we don't want to do any profit with that. So I think that, Matthias, for you, that was really important. You mentioned that a couple of times as well. We don't want to earn money with that. We even said if we get funding, and if we ever have more money funding-wise than we need to pay our bills, we would give back the rest to like other open source projects, donate that, or buy a bunch of t-shirts and hand them out to the community, stuff like that. I don't know. So if at the end of money there's a zero, that's completely fine. That's all we ever want. And I think that's important to mention as well.
Yeah, it makes sense, because it's kind of like, you kind of think it's easy to forget that even though it's kind of a non-profit thing, things like hosting and things still actually cost money. So it's got to come from somewhere. It's like with the podcast, I'm not earning anything through doing the podcast, but I've had to buy a lot of equipment. There's the podcast hosting site, so I use Buzzsprout. There's what we're using now, Riverside. So each of these has a subscription. So there's, even though it's not a profit, there's still costs associated with things. So I kind of wonder whether when you do actually do your GitHub thing and you make things open source, when it's in a position to do so, I know GitHub has that sponsorship thing, so maybe that's a possibility.
Yeah, they do. I mean, even I'm an MVP, so MVPs get a little bit of Azure grant every year. So it's sort of based on that right now. But there's other things we have to pay which are not as easy to get by. Sort of, we're using pre-render IO, which is taking care of search engine optimization, which is helping with the link preview, the link unfurling. That helps, and it's a really, really great service. I wouldn't want to miss that, but that's not part of Microsoft or GitHub or whatever, so we have to pay them anyway. The whole pages, or most of the pages, hosted on Cloudflare. We're using quite a few Cloudflare services, especially to improve performance and all that. That also has to be paid for separately, because they are not related with GitHub or Microsoft. Based on the Azure hosting fees, I'm pretty sure there's tons of ways we don't have to pay that, because Microsoft has a pretty good community offering, even like GitHub as well, and so I'm pretty sure we can sort that. But that's by far all of it.
Yeah. Out of interest, with the Cloudflare one, because I use it for quite a lot of my sites, but it's the free tier. What is it that requires the paid for?
Well, we use Cloudflare Pages just for the pages based on Vue.js. So it's a Vue 3 application. We use Cloudflare Pages to host the front end. We also use Cloudflare Pages sort of as our CDN. Our whole media repository for all the images and all that is on Cloudflare as well. And also Cloudflare has a worker which redirects any bot traffic to pre-render. So any traffic coming from Googlebot, Twitterbot, whatever, goes to pre-render IO to get a pre-rendered version, because the dynamic view version just doesn't work properly. And you have to pay for the worker hours. I think it's in the free version. I think it's something around 100,000 per year, per month or something. Right now we are at 12,000 or so. That's completely fine. So nothing to worry about. But at some point, depending on growth, depending on visitors on the website, that quickly sums up really.
Yeah, I forget that Cloudflare does hosting and a whole bunch of other stuff. I just use it for CDN, so you get quite a lot for free. But then if you're using it for hosting as well, then that makes
right now it's not an issue at all. Like most of the stuff we do right now is for free because we are still in a size where the free tiers just work fine. We use Auth0 for authentication, for example. That's good up to 7,500 users per month. So we're still far away from that. So no problem with that. But at some point, depending on the growth and depending on how things continue, we might actually get problems regarding these things.
Yeah, especially with Auth0, because that gets, when you get the paid for one, that becomes suddenly very expensive.
Yes. Yeah, it's funny in many ways that I realized again, building such a thing like a community page is not too far away from building a full-blown software as a product, software as a service thing. We use the same things. We have a .NET Core backend. We have Redis. We have Azure Search for that. We have an SQL database. So all the things a normal application would use as well.
Yeah, definitely. It always surprises me when I go back and do old .NET Framework development or something, and then you realize actually how far .NET has come now, where actually a lot of the things you said then, it's like obviously complicated, but once you know it, you can actually knock things up quite quickly.
I was working for teamwork.com, a project management platform, 5 years ago, and they chose to use Golang as their main backend thing now. And a lot of that is because they had really, really bad memories of .NET. They were trying to do something with ASP forms back in the days, which obviously was really, really bad. Like, don't have to make that a secret. It was really, really bad. But Microsoft came a long way since then, and things really, really improved. Especially with the later .NET Core version, things are really, really great and competitive as well. But it took a long way. So
I recently did a talk at a local user group in Oxford about modern .NET development, because basically the crowd were developers, but not many not .NET developers. So it's kind of trying to raise awareness. And as I was talking through this, one of the sections I had was about performance. And I mentioned a blog post by Stephen Taub, I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he always, every year for .NET, every new version, he writes a massive blog post about all the performance improvements that have gone into that version. And bear in mind that they do them like yearly now. And in the slide, I did like an animated GIF of me scrolling down his blog post and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And it's insane, all the work that goes into the performance. And this is each version. It's just so fast now.
Yeah, it's funny. I want to mention that it's funny how the page just helped me already myself. Like I had something I wanted to use views and stored procedures in Entity Framework because Azure Search works a lot better with a view than just a pure table, because I want to have more than just a single table indexed. And I remembered that one creator actually had a video about that, so I just looked it up on the page, watched it again, and that really helped. So I actually used my own search functionality already to help me. So I think that's a good proof.
Oh, very nice. It's always good when you can dog food your own project.
Yeah. I actually like the I'm not sure where the term is coming from, but I actually like the dog food term. I mean, some people name it eat your own dog. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but I think that's really, really important, because if you can use whatever you build, then probably there's other people. And if you hate what you build, then probably other people hate it as well.
Yeah, as a developer not working on your own thing, you don't think about the user flow, and you think about the technologies and the architecture and everything.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
if you watch over the shoulder of someone that uses it, it's like, oh, you do it that way then. So then it's kind of can be quite eye-opening. But if you use it yourself, that's even better.
We actually had that a couple of times. Matthias is a lot using the mobile phone, so he's a lot looking at We.NET on his phone, while I'm mostly looking at it on my normal Chrome instance, and even on a 4K screen quite often. So I missed a couple of things he saw instantly on his phone, which I didn't even see because I missed testing it on my phone. So, yeah.
I think the problem with the end users as well is kind of quite often, if there's something that's not quite right and more clicks than it needs to be, or whatever it is, then most of the time they won't tell you. They'll just work around it or something. So actually doing it yourself, you're catching things that maybe other people might be an annoyance to other people, but not actually, and they might not raise it to you.
It's even worse. Like I've heard people say, "Hey, this is not working well. I don't like that product, whatever," just because of a small bug, really, because of something that was never used to work, never meant to work like it did. And they did not complain or ask about that. Instead, they just say, "Oh no, I don't like that," and move on. So, yeah, I think that's a majority of people actually.
Yeah, definitely. So, looking at the time, we should probably get on to dev tips. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about weare.net before we do move to dev tips?
No, I don't. No.
Cool. So let's do dev tips.
One dev tip I would have is like never stop learning, just in general. And the one thing I liked is Scott Henselman had that a while ago in one of his TikTok things. I think I can't get the full words, but he said something like, "At the end of the year, do you want to be the one who read a ton of books, who attended a ton of conferences, and who looked at a ton of samples, or do you want to be the one who actually wrote the books, who gave the talks, and who actually published all the samples?" So you have all this knowledge, like a ton of developers have a ton of knowledge in their head. What do you do with that? If I tell someone, I was an engineering manager for quite a while, like right now I'm not, and I'm sort of happy that I'm not because I can just work for myself. I like being an engineering manager, but at some point you are happy if you're not responsible for people, like for a while at least, because it can be quite exhausting, and at some point you're happy about that. However, you can work on something with all your experience for yourself. Like you take 8 hours, you build some piece of code, whatever, you write some code, or you can tell others how to actually write that code and have them build it, and that actually multiplies your knowledge. And these people can then go ahead and write the same thing, and like you can tell that to 10 people, and then 10 people can do what you can do. So actually, A, learning, and B, sharing your experience is, I think, one of the most important things in for every developer, really, not even related to .NET.
Yeah, definitely. I always think about it as like you're learning it more than twice, because if you're going to do a talk or you're going to teach someone, you generally remind yourself about it before. So you've initially learned it, then you're reminding yourself. Then when you're talking through it and articulating it, you're learning it again. So by sharing your knowledge, you're learning it 2 or 3 times what you would have done without doing it. Matthias, did you have a dev tip?
I would like to add, I would really recommend everyone to start a blog, even if you're just at the beginning of your .NET journey, because it helps you to understand what you already know in a new way. And then you can improve yourself, get a ton of feedback, and with things like social media and of course weare.net, you can get to know other creators and get the feedback from them. And if you're not sure how to start all this, you can, for example, also join the private LinkedIn group, ask your questions there. Some people struggle, which blog system should they use? So this can all be solved.
Actually, can I add to that? Someone mentioned a while ago that if you don't know what to write about as a developer, you can sort of start doing that as a diary, really. Like, hey, today I fixed these issues. Like, even that can sometimes help. And especially what also helps is Stack Overflow. I really think Stack Overflow is completely underrated. Just the other day, I was looking for some issue, found a solution, figured I wrote the answer myself like 10 years ago. That happened, and I've heard a lot of people say exactly that. Yeah, just the other day I found my own solution to be helpful. Stack Overflow is really great, and just going through that, reading other people's questions you might be able to answer, is really a good way to start into all that.
So with blogging, do you worry that, like, for example, at the moment with ChatGPT, for example, you can ask it to write a blog post about, in one line, write a blog post about X, and it does an amazing, you would not know that it was written by a bot in seconds. And I do wonder what that actually is going to do for blogging, but not just blogging, actually, because I don't know if you've heard of Midjourney, which does the AI artwork.
Mm.
And that's absolutely insane. So all these things, you wonder, like, what's it going to do for humans that were doing those things?
I have a completely, well, not completely, but an opposite meaning to that, because yes, it can produce really good content, but it's also quite wrong at the same time. Quite often, whatever you get is really bad, because it only knows what it was trained for. That's the whole thing. If you think of GitHub Copilot, for example, that's a similar thing. It is an awesome time saver. It really, really helps me a lot like you could do things a lot faster. And I see ChatGPT in a similar way. It can help you get started a ton easier. Like it can give you give it some outlines, it produces a blog post for you, which is like 80% fine, and you still add like some tweaks and do it properly. And that's where it actually is really, really helpful. Like doing the first draft, getting things done for you, doing like most of the stuff you would have spent ages on. So it gives you a head start into things. So it effectively gives you more time for other important things, but it won't replace someone in that sense.
I kind of agree right now, but like if you show me ChatGPT a year ago, what it's doing now, well, my mind is still blown. I just can't believe that it's doing what it's doing. So, and this is it's just the start, isn't it? So in 5 years' time, it's kind of all those things you've mentioned. Are they going to still be an issue? Is it going to be right all the time? And it's kind of, I just think it's kind of like we're just entering one of the biggest changes we've seen in a very long time since the computer.
I think it will change a ton of jobs. It will change a ton of things in the industry in general. Like there are even services which can produce video. I mean, there's DALL-E producing images. And just the other day I've seen some, I actually don't remember the name. It's producing videos. So you give it a prompt and it gives you a GIF animation or something, which is generated based on your prompt. And yeah, there's the whole discussion with bots and if AI is dangerous, that whole lawsuit, all the top CEOs, CDOs, whatever, are doing, hey, please stop working on ChatGPT at least for a year. Let us all let that thing in, sort of, is what Elon said, I think. It will definitely change the way we work, for sure. But I don't think it will replace anyone. At least if you are willing to, like, change your work behavior. If you want to, like, be an old guy and stick to whatever we do right now and don't adapt to it, yeah, then you're probably going to be replaced quite fast. But if you try to get used to it, try to get used to all the new things we have, all the new AI things that really make your job a lot easier. If you want to get used to it, then I think it's an advantage for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. I'm using it like every day, and it's just helping me out so much. It's kind of, as you say, it's just like the tasks, even like things like looking on Stack Overflow, I'm doing a lot less, and reading through documentation because I'm using that to kick me off and write a whole bunch of code, and then I'm taking that and tweaking it. As you said, it always needs tweaks, but it gets me 80% of the way there. So yeah, it's just incredible time saving.
It already brought up new jobs technically, because there, like just the other day I was looking through something and there was a company asking for prompt engineers. So there was a company hiring ChatGPT prompt engineers, which is a job that didn't exist like a couple of months ago. So it even brings us new jobs. And we had just the other day we had a discussion with internal in DeepL. So DeepL is doing machine learning based translation. That's why the quality is so good. The quality we have is actually a lot better than Google or Microsoft. But it's still not perfect. So I think someone mentioned, hey, if you translate a legal document, we might be at 95%, and the rest they have to do manually. And then we were talking about what is actually needed to get to 100, and we said that's not possible. We will never have a 100% accurate translation, just because there's so much stuff. There's slang. There's so many things you just can't do automatically. I mean, we might get pretty close, 98, 99% maybe, but you will never get to 100%. And I think that's the same for like things like ChatGPT. Yeah, it's good. It's improving all the, like, there are already documents generated by ChatGPT, which like, even like doctors, engineers, whatever, couldn't identify as being AI generated. Yes, but we will never be at 100% to say like everything that comes out of ChatGPT is like perfect. I don't think we will ever get there.
Oh, I would say never, but
Yeah.
we'll see. So talking about AI, which this was unplanned, but it kind of leads quite nicely into my dev tip, is I keep up to date with what's going on with LinkPad, and we've had an episode on LinkPad with the author, and I've done YouTube videos on LinkPad actually, which is suddenly, for some reason, I don't know why, it's suddenly getting a lot of traffic to that video, and I'm not sure why, but I saw in the latest beta version of LinkPad, there's an AI, LinkPad AI, which hooks into ChatGPT or OpenAI API, and it gives you like all this stuff, but actually in line. I think if you press Shift Space, you get like it's autocomplete, so you can write a comment with write this and shift space, and it'll type out the results from like OpenAI. And there's a whole bunch of like refactorings. You can tell it to write unit tests for your code, and it's all in LinkPad, which is awesome. So I'm actually going to, my next YouTube video I'm going to create is I'm going to do about that, which I've not done at the time of recording, but by the time this podcast episode goes out, it probably will have been published once I create it. I've not recorded it yet, but yeah, so I'll link to that in the show notes. But yeah, it's just AI's everywhere, isn't it? It's pretty insane.
Yeah, I mean, as an MVP, you might have access to quite a few things other people don't yet. Like, we got an invite to that new, what's that called, GitHub Copilot chat in Visual Studio. It's an amazing piece of technology. It really helps. Like, AI is just everywhere, really. I'm not sure if you've seen the announcement for the whole Microsoft 365 Copilot. I only saw a couple of videos, but like building a PowerPoint presentation by just writing a couple lines of text, and it gives you a whole presentation with animations and everything. Yeah, that's nice. I wouldn't say no to that. So
yeah, and then there's the Copilot X stuff, which I saw a recent video. One of Nick Japsas's ones on YouTube. He hadn't got it yet, but he was like going through the announcement page, talking about all the features. And at the end, he was like saying, "If anyone from Microsoft is listening, please give me early access." I don't even think he got it at this point. Maybe he's got it now. I don't know, but we can all book bag. Yeah, so I'll do the same as him. If anyone's listening, please give me access.
I do have access to that. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but I do have access to that, and it's great.
Is Copilot X the same as Chat?
Copilot X is the same as Copilot, but based on ChatGPT on GPT-4.
Okay, yeah.
And I think they did a couple of more additions. I don't know. It's a lot faster, basically doing the same. There's also, I think, I'm not sure if that's related to X. There's an extension you can install in VS Code, like GitHub Copilot. I don't know what the name is. And that gives you a couple of things, like there's a button reformat my code. There's a button make my code robust. And then it automatically adds try and catch everywhere, stuff like that.
It sounds very similar to the LinkPad stuff I've been looking at. But yeah, that's very cool. And even things like, I'm just seeing all sorts of applications I use. So I use Notion quite heavily for notes, and that's got Notion AI now. So if you just start a Notion, press space, it starts trying to predict everything for you, which is a Todoist, and that's got AI. So I think all of these companies are jumping onto AI stuff. Cool. So I'm just looking at the time, so we should probably wrap up. But before we finish, where's the best place for listeners to reach out, to find out more about weare.net, to speak to you if they've got any questions? Hey, this is Dan. I'm just doing a very quick update during editing, as since the recording, Tim and Matthias have heavily embraced Discord, and the community there is growing really quickly. So I thought it was worth a quick update here to point everyone in that direction, as it doesn't get mentioned in the recording. You can find their Discord channel linked both in the show notes and the weare.net website. Anyway, back to the show.
Yeah, definitely go to our homepage or reach out on Twitter.
Twitter, LinkedIn is by far the easiest.
Well, I'll make sure that I include links to weare.net and both of your social media profiles and things, so the listeners can find you that way. Cool. So, yeah, massive thanks for joining us on the show. It's been, it's very cool to talk about weare.net, and quite exciting to see where this goes, because it's, as I say, it's like growing so quickly. It's very impressive.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us.
One thing I wanted to mention, I'm actually thinking about adding podcasts as well, because James asked for that.
Oh, yeah.
Because he loves listening to podcasts, and so we might actually have like a .NET podcast list somewhere. I mean, that's not too many. That's not like having like tons of creators and feeds, but we will probably have a static list of like good .NET podcasts somewhere.
Hopefully, class this podcast is a good podcast. Hopefully, and that goes on the list.
That depends on your editing skills.
We'll see.
Totally fine. I've listened to a couple of things. I really like your podcast. So.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening, and a quick reminder that this podcast is sponsored by Everstack, which is my own company providing software development and consultation services. For more information, visit everstack.com. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do help me spread the word on social media. I normally use the hashtag #unhandledexception, and I can be found on Twitter @Drakan, and my DMs are wide open. And obviously we've got the Discord channel now, and the DMs are open there as well, so feel free to DM me. On my blog at banclark.com has links to all my social stuff too, and we will include links to all the things we've mentioned today in the show notes, which can be found on unhandledexceptionpodcast.com.